Could you tell us your name and what you do for work?
My name is Sandy Fernandez, and I'm a high school counselor.
Why did you want to become a high school counselor?
Mainly just to be there for others the way I wish somebody was there for me.
And what was the journey to becoming a high school counselor like?
Honestly, very unusual. I went from doing my undergrad in pre-physical therapy to changing majors with like 2 classes left to finish my pre-physical therapy, and then jumping to exercise science, and then jumping to teaching, and then teaching for 5 years, and then going back for my master's in counseling.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
That was all over.
It was all over the place.
That's cool, but that's still cool. So what would you recommend to someone who wants to become a high school counselor?
Just to make sure that they're doing it for the right reasons, because it's very easy to get burned out with some of the things that the students let you in on.
Mm-hmm.
And also with the workload, because you also have to make sure that your community and your support system know that you're there for specific reasons and not just paperwork.
And what are some like skills or traits that someone needs to be a good high school counselor?
Relatability.
Mm-hmm.
Relatability is probably the biggest thing, because if you can't be, I don't want to say transparent, because it's not about you, it's about the student. But if you can't relate to somebody on a certain level, then they're not going to feel comfortable enough around you to actually let you in on what they're going through.
Mm-hmm. And what do you like about working with high schoolers?
Mainly when the light switches in the head, you can kind of tell when a student is like, oh, okay, you're right. And then the whole demeanor changes, their whole perspective changes, and it's mostly for the better.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have to remember that you're not going to reach everybody. You're not going to help everybody in the way that you want. And some people just aren't ready to be helped, and you can't force that either.
Okay. What is a typical day or week of work like for you?
Daily, a lot of paperwork, mainly just making sure that everybody's on track and doing what they have to do, along with letting kids come in with an open door policy where they can just come in and vent, but also reminding the kids who continuously come in that there is an appointment system, because if not, then you're just going to have kids bombarding you all day without anybody even realizing it, and you're not going to really be able to see everybody. Those continuous kids who just pop in whenever they want are going to be taking up everybody's time. So it needs to be a fair system, especially when there's only a certain number of people that can help. And the appointment system is the best, but you also have to remember that you need to keep an open door policy for those who need it at the most important times of their crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of paperwork.
What are some misconceptions do you think people have about your career?
I think that people think school counselors just sit behind a desk and talk to kids all day. And that's not necessarily the case. They don't know. Like, in all honesty, when I was going through my undergraduate program, the only reason I found out about the amount of paperwork that goes in is because of the internship portion and the student practicum portion. Other than that, I was not aware about the amount of paperwork that goes in with school counseling.
Yeah, it does sound like a lot. How do you feel that your job impacts society? You can answer from some larger picture to just like the just individual like kid, or not specific, of course, but like, you know, like individual kids you talk to.
So in a larger aspect, it's communication with the parents, especially the seniors. So when you're a senior in high school, you would assume that you kind of have a little bit of a grasp of what it is that you want to do, but you do have those parents who want to still be involved in everything that's going on. So you got to make sure that there's an open communication with the community, with everything that's being shared with the students. It's also being shared with the parents. And then on an individual basis, you also have to remember that what the student says in your office is confidential, to an extent. So there are rules with being a counselor. If a student ever talks about like hurting others, knowing if somebody who's getting hurt, killing themselves, hurting themselves, participating in a crime, anything that prevents them from being there the next day, it needs to be reported. Other than that, your statements, your venting, anything that's said in that office is confidential. And if it is disclosed in any way, you're breaking essentially the law. So the legalities can get a little sticky. And that's one of the things that the parents sometimes don't understand, because they want to know exactly what their student is going through. But as a counselor, you maintain that confidentiality with the student unless it's something that needs to be relayed to the parent or to a higher authority.
Do you find satisfaction in what you do?
Oh, most definitely. Like I said, it's a lot of the times, I mean, it takes a while to get there, but you'll see that light flip in the corner of their eyes, just like, oh, okay.
What about your career do you find the most rewarding?
The most rewarding, probably when I still get messages or students who come by and visit from years past, or students who remember me or say like certain specific things that I help them with. That's probably the most rewarding, because I know I've helped at some point or some level.
And what do you find the most challenging with your career? As we said, like the most rewarding, what's the most challenging?
Yeah. When you get a student or even a staff member, because in reality, we're there for everybody. When you get somebody who knows what's going on and is insightful enough to know what the issue is, but isn't ready to make the change. So like I said, you can't control other people. They can only change whenever they're ready, or they can only do whenever they're ready. And it's, the way I explain it is, it's like a lesson. It's like a lesson in school. You continue to learn the lesson, continue to do it. You get an F, you continue to do it, you get an F, you continue to do it until you actually pass it. Once you pass it, then you're ready to move on to the next lesson. It's the same thing with your situations. If you're not ready to move on, if you haven't learned your lesson, then you're going to continue to repeat it until you're ready to move forward. And a lot of people get stuck. We can't make people do anything because we don't control them. Ultimately, they control their own actions.
Okay. So I had seen some stuff about some states, including Texas, were planning to make it so that like chaplains can replace school counselors, due to like this. Chaplains, yeah. Like chaplains? Is that the right? The church?
No, yeah, it is, but you just caught me off guard.
Yeah. Okay, that answers part of the question. So they were making it so that chaplains can replace school counselors, due to just a shortage of the school counselors being able to be in schools and the amount that's needed. And so I know that school districts have until March 1st of this year, because it was initially I think passed, or was the decision, at least in Texas, was in August. And then it was basically hey, you have until March 1st, the school districts individually to vote on if that would be allowed or not. Are you aware of any decisions made by your school district?
No, and also I don't know how I feel about that, because of the fact that as a counselor, regardless if you're a school counselor or not, you're supposed to remain unbiased. And if you're religious to a certain extent, your biases are going to show as you're counseling. So you're supposed to remain non-judgmental. And as a chaplain, I don't know how non-judgmental you can be.
Yeah. And also there was, I had seen something about how it would, I don't remember if it was just, I think it was just like 40 hours of like training. That would be all they would go, the chaplains would go through to be able to like be qualified to replace a school counselor.
And that's again where it's like, it's more opinion based than it would be actually sorting through and using techniques and using theories to sort through whatever the person is going through. And if you're opinion based, then that's your opinion. It's not anything that's unbiased. It's considered your opinion. So you're putting your own choices, your own thoughts, your own efforts into somebody else's, making them think that they're doing it or making them feel like what they're doing is wrong, when in reality it's supposed to be non-judgmental.
Yeah. Just as a comparison to the about 40 hours that the chaplains would have to go to, how do you remember like an estimate of like, I guess, of how many hours did you put into, how many hours, days, years did you put into?
I want to say it was close to 300 and some hours, if not 500. It was around there, because we had to meet so many direct number of hours and so many indirect hours. Mm-hmm. So the direct hours were considered one-on-one, group counseling, class counseling, class guidance, class lessons. That was considered direct. Indirect is like research proposals, using theories, techniques on an outside basis, doing filing, paperwork. That was indirect. So you need to meet a certain number of hours, and it was in the hundreds. It was close to 300. Minimum was 300. I honestly can't remember the exact amount, but I know it was around 300 and some, I think.
So definitely a lot more than the 40 hours. A lot more than the 40. Okay. Yeah, I had seen when I was doing a bit of research, I had seen that, and I was like, oh, like I wonder what she has to say about that.
Not even close.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
And it used to be that you couldn't even become a school counselor without at least 2 to 3 years of teaching. And now they got rid of that, and you can actually become a school counselor without even having to teach. So it's slowly being, I don't want to say diminished, but the process is being redirected in different areas to become accustomed to society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you had said that you had taught, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when you had become a counselor, was that the 2 years like being removed? Was that already, like, was that still something you still had to be?
So I'll give you an example. I taught, I want to say it was 3 years. I taught, and I'm glad I did teach, because when I decided to go back to school counseling, I already had my years. Mm-hmm. There was another friend of mine who at the time had not taught, went directly into school counseling. She had to get her teacher certification through a different route. Instead of actually getting her degree, it was like an emergency certification or something like that. And then she taught for 2 years, and now she's barely a school counselor, even though she graduated like 2-3 years ago.
Oh. Okay, so
the effect didn't go in until this year, I think, or they're barely writing it into effect. One or the other.
So it's a really recent.
Yes.
Okay, it's a really recent thing. Okay. Yeah, because I had seen that you needed to. Do you think that the having taught helping, with, the being a school counselor?
Oh yeah, most definitely, because you're able to relate to the teachers on their level. Like, as a school counselor, you have to come into the classes. You have to do certain things in regards to the students. You have to take up some of the teacher's time in some aspect, in some way. Mm-hmm. But if you've never taught, you don't know what's going to bother the teacher. You don't know what you're setting back on. You don't know how it's going to affect the classroom management, how the classroom lessons are going to go. So it's just a lot of relatability again. Mm-hmm. So letting the teachers know, like, hey, I know what you're going through, so I'm not going to bother you during this time because I know that's what's important.
Okay. Yeah, I see that. What do you think of the future of of your career field?
Mine or
Yes.
like my specifics or just in general?
Just the general.
So because there is a shortage, I can see why they're doing away with them needing to teach for 2 years. Like I said, school counseling, you can easily get burned out if you don't know how to deal with it correctly, because it's not only speaking with the students and speaking with the teachers and letting them be vulnerable around you, which not a human being doesn't like to be vulnerable. They don't like to expose weaknesses, but these people build relationships with you and they express themselves in certain areas to where you have to know whether or not what phase you need to go to, what route you need to take, what theory you need to use in order for them to best understand. And that's, again, my whole thing is relatability. Yeah. But I think depending on where you get your certification from, you can learn on the best methods. So, like, I'll give you an example from TAM UCC, where I graduated from, their K-CREP, which means that if I've been dragging my feet, but if I ever decide to sit for the board exam, I can become an LPCI, which is a licensed professional counseling intern, and then I can gather my hours under supervision and then become a full LPC, which means that once I decide to leave school counseling, I can still go into private practice. I can still do clinical mental health. I can still do family marriage. I can still do child and adolescence. I don't have to stick with strictly just school counseling. But not a lot of places offer that. A lot of places are not K-CREP accredited, which means that they do not get to become an LPC.
Oh. Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
So I've been dragging my feet because it's like a $300 and some exam, and you can only take it twice a year, I believe. So I think there's like once in December or once in April or somewhere around there. But once you pass it, you just start accumulating your hours, but you have to pay somebody to supervise you.
How do you balance work and life? Because, like you said, that it can be a draining thing and very
self-care. Self-care is the biggest thing. You got to learn to give yourself some grace, because if you don't, it will eat you alive, especially if you have other things going on in your life. So me, I go to the gym regardless, daily. Don't matter what time, don't matter when I can get it in. Just as long as I can get it in, I'm going. And that's just my me time. Like, when I have my children, there's a babysitting center there, so they can go to the babysitting center. If I don't, then I can go early in the morning before I go to work, and I can go after work if I want. So it just self-care. Whatever it is that gets you in a happy state of mind, or at least a calm state of mind or peaceful state of mind, do it.
Yeah, because I can see how that's definitely important, so you don't burn and crash, I guess. So this is, I guess, a bit out of a left field question, but I kind of wanted it to relate to other things I have done. And so I was like, well, let's put this question in because it's something that is talked about. I don't know how much recently, but I know in the past that's been a big thing. So what are your thoughts on video games and how they do or don't affect how kids behave?
I think to an extent, it also just depends on the type of child. Yeah. So if a child is on the video game 24/7 and is continuously there and that's all they know, then I can see how that can affect them. But if they are doing other things besides being part of the video game, then I think they're able to build a sense of reality and knowing what is tolerated and accepted amongst society. So they're able to tell the difference between it affecting them and it not affecting their choices on a day-to-day basis.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you so much, and hope you have a good evening, night, weekend.
You too. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.